Hi, Preet. Hi, Mandeep. Good to see you here. So we have our audience also who is joined, but let's wait for a couple of minutes for a few more to join. And a very good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you're joining us from. I know we have audiences joining us from all over the world who have registered for this webinar. Okay, I see a sizable number of our audience. They've already joined and they've been waiting for quite some time. So I think it's a good idea to maybe start. On behalf of the TCG Digital Aviation team, I'd like to extend a very warm welcome to our audience and to our speakers. Today, we'll be showcasing an agentic framework on our platform MCube that is focused on airline recovery from IROPs. Now, today we have an excellent mix of audience, senior leaders from operations to customer experience. We have also, senior leaders joining us from crew scheduling and marketing and strategy. And, that just goes to show, right, that recovery from IROPS is not just an operational challenge, or something that the operations team is facing, but it's also a critical factor in ensuring customer experience and cost optimization. So what we will explore today is how agentic AI can fundamentally lead to a seamless recovery through a network of intelligent and collaborating agents that range from IROPS prediction to optimization to IROPS communication. With that, I would like to introduce our speakers. We have with us Mandeep Grewal, Executive Vice President, Travel and Hospitality for TCG Digital. Mandeep brings 30 years of experience across aviation and travel, having served in leadership roles at United Airlines and Continental Airlines. She has also served as the founding president of United Airlines Business Resource Group. At TCG Digital, she's driving the travel and hospitality business unit, which includes aviation, scaling AI-powered solutions to deliver end-to-end customer journeys. Thanks for joining us, Mandeep.
It's a pleasure. Thank you. Thanks.
And we also have Preet Chaudhary, Vice President Global Aviation at TCG Digital. Preet brings close to 30 years of experience advising global airlines on customer experience, airline operations, and transformation, underpinned by strong capabilities in AI, digital transformation, and cloud-based systems. At TCG Digital, he leads the aviation business, delivering scalable and high-impact solutions. Thanks for joining us, Preet.
Thank you. Thanks, Aditi.
And before we start, a very quick note for the audience. We are going to take the audience questions towards the end. And some of you have already sent in your questions, before the session. So thanks a lot for that. We are going to address those towards the end of the session. Also, the audience is muted for a seamless webinar experience, but you can put in your questions in the chat box that you see on your console on the screen, right? So with that, I would like to hand it over to Preet to kickstart the session. Over to you, Preet.
Thank you, Aditi. So today's agenda, as we know that it's IROPS, but I was just kind of remembering a business leader who was recently mentioning that in airlines, there is nothing called IROPS, right? And it's just operation, because Mandeep, as you can probably vouch for that, there's no single day that goes as planned. So there are different degrees of, I think, irregular operations, but regardless of like the magnitude of the irregular operations, I think the focus remains the same, that how do you seamlessly recover, right? The impact is huge. Mandeep, I was just reading some of the numbers, like there's more than 9 million passengers affected globally per year, like the IROP situation, huge financial impact. In US, I think it's more than $8 billion. That's a direct cost, not to consider like the brand loyalty and those impacts. And we have had our fair share of IROPs in recent years, like starting from like recent year the North American storm to like the recent geopolitical events, things like that. So my question to you, Mandeep, as a business leader who has been in the industry for so many years, you have seen your fair share of IROPs of various shapes and sizes. If you can share a little bit about your experience of some of the IROP situations, how you had handled, what was the impact and challenges faced, and maybe we can go from there.
Yeah. No, thank you for the questions, Preet, and Aditi, thank you for the introduction. And I'll start by actually thanking everyone that's attending and has joined the webinar. Appreciate the time you're taking to listen to us. Great question, Preet. I mean, irregular operations, like you said, has become somewhat of a norm in our industry, unfortunately, due to various circumstances, whether it be weather, whether it be related to other issues, geopolitical or otherwise. The reality is, for any airline, the importance of being able to understand irregular operations, predict them, and then handle them appropriately is really, really critical. Because what our customers are looking for, what the traveling public is looking for, is that kind of the assurance that when and if something goes wrong, that they'll be taken care of. Normally on blue sky days, everything is fine. People go to the airport, get on a plane, get to their destination without a problem. It's okay. That's not what they'll always remember. What they'll remember is when and if they were in a disruptive situation, how did the airline take care of them? How did the airline kind of reaccom them? How did the airline reaccom their bags? How did they message them to kind of inform them about what is happening? So irregular operations, like, we know the frequency, and you quoted the number right now. It's pretty incredible in terms of how many, and it's across all airlines. It's not one or the other. Every airline is going to face some kind of disruption at some point in time. So preparing for that has become really, really important. So planning is what's required. Having the right technology to execute on those action plans is really important. And of course, part of that is the constant communication, a transparent form of communication with the customers. So,
no, great perspective, Mandeep. So let me ask a follow-up question. Like, if you can share with some examples, right, in your days leading some of the airports and other business functions, some of the IROP situations, how you were handling them or how the airlines were recovering, and looking back, had we had the help of the technology, how we could have probably handled it better, or what were the shortcomings in those recovery situations that we can try to possibly address now with the help of technologies available to us?
Good question, because I've had the privilege and honor of working in the aviation industry for over 3 decades. And clearly when I started out, over 30 some years ago, we didn't have the technology we have today. So back then the tasks used to be a lot more manual. And it was like when things were going wrong, we had to pick up the phones and call each other and kind of create some kind of a plan to help the customers and help the crew and everyone else impacted by a disruption. Fast forward, 30 years, we are here today and we have incredible technology that can help us execute faster. And so the key, the enabler, is technology, which helps us now address the situations in the form of a much faster resolution for customers. So a couple of things is, one, we can predict in terms of when these may potentially happen. When you know that there's a potential weather pattern that's going to affect a flight, that is known, right? If you know that ahead of time, then you can use technology to start planning for how do we if there's going to be a delay or if there's going to be a cancellation, how do you start proactively taking care of the customers, proactively reassigning the crew, and so on and so forth. So it can be done in a much, much faster way than what it was. So that's where technology is really helping the airlines, but also truly helping enhance the customer experience. Because again, going back to what customers want to know when things are going wrong, that you're going to take care of them. And it's almost like a surprise and delight aspect. What happens if a customer is going to an airport and they realize that, hey, my flight is going to be potentially disrupted because of weather, but they already receive a message from the airline saying, don't worry, we've taken care of you. and here's what's going to happen with your flight, or here's the new flight you're on. It changes, it reduces the anxiety for customers. It creates a much better sense of experience, obviously, for them. But what it also drives is increased loyalty to that airline, because they know that, hey, I can rely on this airline to take care of me. And how we take care of our customers, how you drive that customer experience, is truly becoming the differentiating factor, right? So we as airlines have to really kind of focus on that aspect and say, this is important because this investment is going to help bring loyalty. So all of this is connected, and it's not separated from, you can't say loyalty is on one side and customer experience is on one side. They all are connected, and how you as an airline take care of your customers in the times of need is going to drive how loyal they are to you for future business as well. So technology has become the enabler, and we've got to kind of leverage that technology.
No, great insight, Mandeep. If I may just quickly ask a quick follow-up question. So from your perspective, we are seeing, it's maybe my perception that probably the disruptions are increasing in frequency. So what is making disruption management increasingly complex for airlines today?
I think what has happened, if you look at, again, the past decade or so, or a bit longer than that, airlines generally have grown, right? In their size, in their scope, in terms of where they're flying. The networks have become bigger, but bigger networks have also created more complex networks. So when and if a disruption happens on a particular flight, it may not just affect that flight, it may affect all the other routes that aircraft was going to fly on, right? And then if you actually translate that into, it's not just an aircraft, but think about all the actual passengers that were flying on that aircraft. So if there's a delay, a major delay on one segment, or their first segment that aircraft was going to fly, that creates a disruption on the remaining segments for that day. Now count how many passengers are potentially affected by that ripple effect. And so that multiplies and magnifies really fast. And so the number of passengers potentially affected by disruptions clearly today has grown because of the complex nature of the networks that airlines have. So all the more, you have to be focused on how do you address this, how do you kind of predict these. A lot of the disruptions can be predicted, and therefore, they can be managed proactively, and that has become, I would say, and should become the focus of every airline if they are not already focused on it.
Great point, Mandeep.
Yeah. So Preet, actually, could I ask a question? We're talking a lot about, artificial AI in aviation. Needless to say, AI is being discussed and mentioned across many industries, but especially in our aviation industry. So when you talk about disruptions and agentic AI, how do you kind of perceive that agentic AI could help and support in the disruption aspects of the airline operations?
A great question, Mandeep. So before I go into the agentic aspect of the solution, let me just step back and talk about the traditional way of doing things that we have been doing, right? So the industry has been using data and advanced analytics for quite some years now. But the traditional AI is mostly reactive. It churns huge amount of historical data, and you have to train the model in a particular set of data. And it's very good at correlation, kind of tying the past historical data to the current set of events. It's not very good into causality. So anytime you have a unique nature of disruption, and as you rightly said, Mandeep, that there are so many events happening with tighter network and connections and geopolitical events and weather patterns and whatnot, historical data is not always a good base to form like, a decision. And then the other aspect of your traditional AI is it has a single domain focus. So as you said, like there are so many aspects to recovery in an IROPS disruption situation. You have to think about the crew, you have to think of the metal, you have to think obviously about the passengers, the airports, and so many other factors, and everything needs to go together holistically. You cannot look into each one of them in silo. So that has been one of the major, I would say, bottleneck or limitations of the traditional approach, that maybe you are focusing on the aircraft recovery, just getting the aircrafts out, but in doing that, you are probably running into like, some crew issues, some high value passengers maybe not be getting serviced, and so on and so forth. So you might see some improvement in recovery in immediate, like, the window, but there may be a dip in your performance, like, the day after or a couple of days, because you cannot bring the aircrafts back. You didn't plan holistically, right? And the crews, and they are scattered all over the place and so on. So where agentic AI comes into picture is like, the agents, by their definition, they perceive, they reason, they decide, and then they act autonomously. So which is a major leap from the traditional AI. And you can have like an orchestration layer, or you can have like a master decision layer on agent sitting on top of various other agents who are specialized in like doing their own part, and look into this disruption management and recovery holistically. So just to give an example, so you are from Dallas area, so you are no stranger to the weather events in DFW and like, things like that. So let's say, you know that a weather event is coming, the airport is going to get shut down for 6-7 hours, and it's moving very fast. So in an agentic world, you could have like, one weather agent which is monitoring proactively the weather patterns and then notifying all the systems. You could have an aircraft agent separately, which is running, like looking into all the, like, the aircrafts which is in the air, whatever can be diverted, they can divert them. One agent independently can look into all the crew, their legalities, their, who can be like, brought to DFW, who can fly. There can be a passenger agent focused on like looking into the passenger recovery, like looking into their loyalty status, their intent, like who is traveling to where, and all of that, to take the optimal decision on like, which passengers boards the flight, which flight, and so on. So there can be like, a whole plethora of like independent agents who are all working in silos, and there can be an agent-to-agent orchestration, that there can be a master decision agent that sits on top of that, and that orchestrates this whole recovery process. And that can bring down this whole recovery process tremendously. As you know, Mandeep, that you have only probably 15 to 30 minutes to take your first recovery decision before it starts hitting the network and cascading effect, right? So there's very little time to react. So that's where I think the agentic approach comes into play, that you can have the agents autonomously not only just monitor, but they can take the decisions also.
Yeah, no, that's incredible. And I love the word like you're using, orchestrate, because I really think where all this is going to come into place, it's going to be like an orchestra. You need a composer to kind of help bring all the pieces together. And it comes down to the speed at which, obviously the accuracy and the speed at which these solutions can be delivered. So, that's exciting. It's honestly very, it's really exciting to think about what this can do for disruption management in aviation. So excited about all the solutions that are coming DCG can provide. That said, should we go to the demo?
Yeah, let's take a closer look how this works in practice.
Yeah. We should go to the demo.
Hello and welcome to our demonstration of the IROPS agentic framework built on MCube. Airline operations are incredibly complex, and disruptions can quickly cascade across the entire network. Our framework addresses this through a collaboration.
I think we had a bit of a
Yeah. I'll just play it again. It was a disruption there.
disruptions. They happen in
Hello
real
and
life.
welcome to our demonstration of the IROPS agentic framework built on MCube. Airline operations are incredibly complex, and disruptions can quickly cascade across the entire network. Our framework addresses this through a collaboration of agents, including the IROPS predictor, the communicator, and the optimizer agent, working together to predict disruptions early, coordinate responses, and optimize recovery decisions. The first component in this framework is the predictor agent. We'll also show you the interface for this shortly. The predictor agent estimates the probability of operational disruptions. It continuously analyzes multiple data sources such as ACARS, NOTAMs, weather data, and other operational and real-time inputs. The system applies predictive models to calculate a disruption probability score. Once a potential disruption is detected, the communicator agent is triggered to deliver timely and personalized updates to passengers across relevant channels, keeping travelers informed about delays, cancellations, or recovery options. This helps reduce congestion at service counters, minimize uncertainty, and significantly improve passenger satisfaction. In the demo later, we'll show how these automated communications are triggered and delivered in real time. The third component is the hybrid optimizer agent, which works closely with the predictor agent to enable integrated disruption recovery. This agent simultaneously evaluates multiple operational factors, including aircraft availability, crew scheduling, and passenger recovery, to determine the most effective recovery strategy. It uses a set of specialized optimization solvers that collaborate within the agentic framework, allowing the system to analyze complex trade-offs across the network. Based on the airline's priorities, whether that is minimizing operational costs, maximizing passenger satisfaction, or balancing both, the optimizer generates a viable recovery plan. Importantly, the system looks several days ahead, ensuring resources are distributed intelligently and preventing bottlenecks across the recovery timeline during major IROPS situations. If we look at the overall architecture, the system operates across 3 layers. 1, a real-time data layer, ingesting operational inputs from multiple sources. 2, an intelligence layer, where predictive models and optimization engines analyze the situation. 3, an action and integration layer, where agents trigger communications and recovery decisions. Now let's see the platform in action. Here you can see the MCube interface showing the network overview dashboard. For this demo, we've simulated a scenario around November 8th, representing a severe snowstorm affecting flight operations. You will notice several aircraft indicators on the map, some highlighted in yellow and others in red, indicating different levels of disruption risk. From here, we can also change the date to analyze different scenarios. The dashboard shows key metrics such as the number of active flights, average delays, disruption probability scores, the number of flights with probability scores above 70, and the cancellations recorded so far. I can also switch to the station view for different airports. You can see that JFK is not significantly impacted, but if we look at ORD, you'll notice quite a few flights showing very high disruption probability scores. Once disruptions are detected, the system proactively engages with passengers to keep them informed and supported. This is where the communicator agent plays a critical role. In this view, you can see that a thunderstorm is impacting operations at ORD, affecting 47 flights. The dashboard shows how many warnings and notifications have been sent to passengers, as well as the rebooking and rescheduling offers issued to help them adjust their travel plans. It also tracks how many of these offers have been accepted, giving operations teams clear visibility into the overall resolution rate and effectiveness of the recovery process. The next step is the outreach composer. Here we return to the same operational scenario and select a specific flight to review the disruption in more detail. In this case, the system shows a delay of approximately 40 minutes, along with the underlying reason for the delay. From here, we can generate a draft communication for passengers. At this point, the LLM engine is triggered, which automatically composes messages tailored to the situation. Based on different passenger profiles and travel contexts, the system generates personalized and context-aware communications. To ensure PII compliance, we are only displaying clusters of passengers rather than individual customer identities. However, in a real operational environment, this entire pipeline can be configured to generate and deliver fully personalized communications for each individual passenger rather than sending a single message to a customer segment. This allows airlines to scale highly personalized passenger engagement, ultimately improving the overall disruption management experience. With that, we conclude the overview of the IROPS agentic framework.
Thank you. As you saw in the demo that we showed, so there are three key elements of the solution holistically. So there is a predictor. So there's a bunch of agents that are trying to predict the events, looking at several signals coming from inside and outside. Then there is a communicator, and then there is a recovery option. So the recovery is what we were talking about earlier in our segment with Mandeep, that we need to take a holistic view of the recovery rather than trying to recover the metal or the crew or the passengers in silos. You need to have a holistic approach to that. And you can also codify your standard operating procedures with different parameters. So let's say when you are in a cost saving mode, you can have a different set of parameters versus when you are trying to protect your high value passengers. In some segments, you may have a different set of parameters. So those can be kind of modeled into the agents, then agents can tune into those requirements and then actually predict or act on the recovery accordingly. So that's on the recovery side. But another very important aspect of the solution that we were showing just now is the proactive communication to the customers, which is very important. And Mandeep, I want to kind of get your some thoughts on this, because I feel that communication is the key, right? I mean, things happen. Most of the things in IROPS are probably beyond your control. You are kind of trying to recover from there. But in order to communicate to the customers, you have to know the customers, their intent of travel, their probably loyalty status, and a lot more information, so that the communications are not generic, they are personalized, and they're tailored to the customer needs. So Mandeep, I know that there is a huge impact to this in the Net Promoter Score as well. So I would love to get your thoughts on the customer communication side of the IROPS.
Absolutely. And you said it, Preet, is, customers, and we talked about it earlier in the conversation as well, is customers ultimately want to know that you're providing them with good, transparent information and telling them how you're going to take care of them. That aspect can really, really help lift your customer satisfaction scores or Net Promoter Scores, whichever way you measure the customer experience aspects of it. So yes, timely communication, accurate information, transparent information, telling customers exactly what is happening, why it's happening, but how, more importantly, are you taking care of them? That is a huge benefit in helping drive up your customer experiences and giving you the bump that you need on your Net Promoter Scores. That's how, all of us in the aviation side are measuring how do customers feel about an airline. And again, I'll keep pushing. That's what drives loyalty to a particular airline. And that, as you know, if you build a strong, loyal customer base, that helps drive revenue for your future. So I know we are limited on time. Aditi, I don't know if you want to take it away if we have time for Q&As. If not, we can make sure we still respond to any questions via email.
No, absolutely. We do have some time for Q&A, and it was a very engaging session. And like I said, we have audience questions who have sent us before the session. So let me start with the first. 1 second. All right. So the first question is, what are the best practices for both anticipated disruptions and those that are ad hoc, and how the airlines industry can minimize the impact to its passengers? Yeah, so that was the first question.
I think I'll reiterate what we were just saying. For things that you know are going to be disruptions and you already know ahead of time, planning from an airline perspective, planning the action plan and putting it into action as soon as possible is of critical importance. So that's where the timeliness comes in, but also letting customers know ahead of time that, hey, we know this is going to happen, but don't worry, we've taken care of you. Communicating effectively is critical. And for disruptions that again happen that are ad hoc and unknown, suddenly you're at the airport and something happens, the ability to react quickly and put the action plan again into place and executing that in a timely fashion, all go to say that you as an airline, as a company, have this under control. That's what customers want to know, that you as a management team or as an airline are not going to be surprised by it. Like, surprises happen, but how you react to them is of critical importance. That's the assurance your customers are looking for.
That's great, Mandeep. Thanks a lot. And I think that's where the IROPS communicator comes into play, but that doesn't work in isolation. It works in tandem with the other agents that we just showcased. Preet, do you want to add anything to that question?
No, I would agree to what Mandeep is saying, that with the agentic framework, like as I was mentioning, that we can have several different agents working in tandem, and they can all communicate through a kind of a decision layer that looks into everything holistically. And according to the fast evolving situation, in many cases, the IROPS is a very fast evolving situation. So you need to react quickly to that. So that's where this holistic decision layer comes into play, which can kind of play the role of coordinating with the different agents who are looking into various aspects of the recovery. So talking about the customer communications, if there is one agent that looking into all the customers kind of flying through that particular terminal, they can look into their the part of the journey. So are they part of a transit? They have tight connections. They are kind of trying to reach certain destination by certain time. Are there high value customers and various other factors, right? And those can feed into the overall decision engine and the agent that can then orchestrate these and kind of come up with proactive communications. So as Mandeep was saying, that how we communicate, how frequently we communicate, and all of that is of paramount importance, and that's part of your how you build your brand loyalty, right? So that's where the agentic framework comes into play.
Absolutely, thanks for that, Preet. We have a second question coming in. How does the platform prioritize decisions between crew, aircraft, and passengers during a disruption?
Yeah, so I think I answered some of that question right now. So it depends, right? So the traditional approach had been sometimes you would probably prioritize the middle. You trying to swap the tails and trying to get the aircrafts flown out, and you grab the crews that are available. Oftentimes when trying to recover the crews, you're kind of probably not looking into the legality aspect and when they're flight times are ending and all of that aspect. And then at the same time, while doing that, you also need to look into the passenger recovery as well. So it's not prioritization. I would say it's you have to look into it holistically, right? How do you recover holistically out of the situation? So you might, if you focus too much on getting the aircrafts, the metals out in the air, you might have a short recovery window, but then your performance may overall fall. So take a broader view of 4 or 5 days and look into it holistically, how we are overall recovering. rather than having a shorter narrow viewpoint of the recovery. That's what I would say. Mandeep, if you want to add something to that.
You covered it. Thank you, though.
All right, let's take the third question. This is more on the parameters. What kind of improvements can we expect to see in the recovery time using the platform?
So with the Agentic AI approach, Mandeep, I can just take that question and then feel free to add to that. But based on our studies and what we have seen, because of the speed and the autonomous decision-making capability of the agentic frameworks, there's at least a 40% improvement in direct recovery cost. And with the proactive communications and timely and proactive communications, that has a huge impact, more than 60% impact in an improvement in customer satisfaction. So those are the direct impacts. The indirect impacts to that is even more. And Mandeep, you can speak about what your thoughts are on this.
Yeah, no, I would say, the direct impact is if you can deliver at a fast speed a proactive solution to customers, the impact again on their experience, their customer satisfaction changes, and that has a meaningful impact to your bottom line in the longer run. So it is again, like I said, all these pieces are tied, and if and when customers know that you're going to take care of them, then they will open their wallets up to you as they plan for future travel, and that's important. We are running businesses. So.
Yeah, well, that's a nice way of putting it. Well, thanks, Preet and Mandeep. And maybe just a last question in the interest of time. You may have covered that a little bit before, but maybe if you want to summarize that, the question is more like beyond the immediate disruption recovery. What are the other insights or analytics that the framework provides?
Sure, no, that's a great question. I think IROPS recovery is just the starting point, right? So we are just looking into the immediate recovery, but you have to think beyond that, right? So the agents and the recovery solutions that they're running, that needs to be fed back into the operation, like your network planning, your revenue management, your maintenance systems. It needs to go back to your operation so that there is a feedback loop, right? And then you need to create that holistic, a data fabric, if you will, bringing all these disparate data sources into one. That's where I think there is a need of building an aviation AI hub, if you will, that works as a digital twin of your airline's operations, and IROPS is a part of that. And then you have this feedback loop to your operations that goes back, the decisions taken and the recovery solutions that you have recommended or executed, that needs to go back to your operations. So, in today's commoditized world, right, this actually builds resilience, and resilience itself can be a commodity, right? So instead of thinking IROPS as just a recovery vehicle, think of it, as Mandeep said, think of it as a vehicle for building your brand loyalty. So this is an opportunity where you can have a chance to build your brand loyalty. That's how I think of it in the bigger picture. Mandeep, your final words on that.
You said it. It's our focus is to help you, the airlines, build that loyalty, and all these solutions kind of help bridge that gap and get you to where your end goal is. So we'd love to partner with you on that.
Yeah, no, that's a very powerful ending statement from both of you, that we shouldn't see that as just a recovery vehicle, but more like something more strategic, building trust with customers. It goes a long way. All right, so with that note, we do have one or two other questions coming in, but in the interest of time, we'll take the questions over an email. So we'll get back to the audience over a 1:1 email after this webinar. But I just wanted to kind of end this with some, closing thoughts. So, of course, like you said, this is probably one of the vehicles for building customer loyalty, customer experience. So that is how IROP should be seen, not just as a, recovery, option. Well, we've shown a wonderful demonstration, but we are participating in the World, in the Aviation Festival Singapore next week on the 25th and the 26th of March. So we would love to meet you, people who have joined us in the audience, to give you a more deep dive around this agentic framework, or if you would want to know more around our aviation hub. So we would love to have a discussion with you there. If you would want to set up a meeting with us, do email Mandeep or Preet. You've seen the email IDs on screen, but you will also receive our email IDs over an email that we'll send you. You will receive the recording of the demonstration that we showed you, but we'll of course continue the conversation beyond this. So a very big thank you to our speakers for taking time out for this webinar and for that wonderful engaging session. And thanks to our audience for your questions. It makes it all the more engaging. And with that, we end this session. So look forward to speaking to you again. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Thank you everyone for joining. Thanks Aditi for hosting.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.